In a courtroom in the heart of a small American town, Officer Daniel Hargrove stood confidently at the witness stand, weaving a tale of reckless driving and belligerent behavior, pinning it all on the defendant, Lieutenant Commander Aisha Brooks. His testimony painted her as a dangerous, uncooperative black woman who had endangered lives during a routine traffic stop. What he didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that Aisha Brooks was no ordinary civilian. She was a decorated Navy SEAL, a high-ranking officer who had faced combat zones and covert missions with nerves of steel. As Hargrove's lies unraveled, the truth would not only expose his deception but shake the very foundation of the case, revealing a story of prejudice, power, and redemption. Aisha Brooks sat calmly in the defendant's chair, her posture upright, her expression unreadable. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the prosecution called Officer Daniel Hargrove to the stand. He was a seasoned cop, known in the community for his authoritative presence and a reputation for being tough on crime. His uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. To the jury, he was the picture of credibility. Aisha, on the other hand, wore a simple blazer and skirt, her dark hair pulled back neatly. To the untrained eye, she was just another woman facing a minor charge, disorderly conduct and resisting arrest, stemming from a traffic stop gone wrong. But there was far more to her than met the eye. Hargrove began his testimony with a steady voice, recounting the events of the evening in question. He claimed he had pulled Aisha over for speeding, clocking her at 20 miles per hour over the limit on a quiet suburban road. According to him, she had been combative from the start, refusing to provide her license and registration, shouting profanities, and even attempting to flee the scene. He described her as aggressive, uncooperative, and a threat to public safety, justifying his decision to arrest her after what he called a dangerous altercation. The jury leaned forward, some nodding as Hargrove's words painted a vivid picture of a reckless woman who needed to be brought to justice. The prosecutor, a sharp attorney named Margaret Ellison, pressed Hargrove for details, guiding him to emphasize Aisha's alleged hostility. "Officer Hargrove," Ellison asked, "can you confirm that the defendant's behavior escalated to the point where you felt compelled to use force to restrain her?" Hargrove nodded solemnly. "Absolutely. She was yelling, refusing to comply, and at one point, she reached for something in her vehicle. I had no choice but to act swiftly to ensure my safety and the safety of others." The courtroom fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Aisha's attorney, a public defender named Thomas Reed, scribbled notes furiously, his brow furrowed. Aisha remained composed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She hadn't spoken a word since the trial began, trusting Reed to handle her defense. To those watching, her silence might have seemed like resignation, but it was something else entirely: discipline. Aisha Brooks was a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy SEALs, one of the few women to achieve such a rank in the elite Special Operations Force. She had led missions in hostile territories, trained to remain calm under pressure, and earned commendations for her leadership and bravery. This courtroom, with its petty accusations and small-town biases, was just another challenge to navigate. Reed stood to cross-examine Hargrove, his tone measured but firm. "Officer Hargrove, can you confirm the exact speed you clocked my client at?" Hargrove hesitated for a fraction of a second before repeating, "She was going 20 miles over the limit, as I stated." Reed pressed further. "And you're certain she was uncooperative from the moment you approached her vehicle?" Hargrove doubled down, his voice growing more confident. "Yes, sir. She was hostile, refused to comply, and made the situation volatile." Reed nodded, jotting down a note, his face betraying nothing. What Hargrove didn't know was that Aisha had a dashcam in her vehicle, a precaution she had taken after years of hearing stories from friends and family about traffic stops gone wrong. The footage, which Reed had obtained and was preparing to present, told a very different story from Hargrove's testimony. The video showed Aisha pulling over promptly when signaled, her hands visible on the steering wheel as Hargrove approached. She had spoken politely, providing her license and registration without hesitation. When Hargrove asked her to step out of the vehicle, She complied calmly, her tone professional despite his increasingly aggressive demeanor. The dashcam audio captured Hargrove's voice growing sharp as he demanded to know where Aisha was going and why she was in the neighborhood, a predominantly white area where she had been visiting a friend. "You don't look like you belong here," he had said, a comment that wasn't in his official report. When Aisha calmly asked why she was being asked to step out of her car for a minor speeding violation, Hargrove's tone escalated, accusing her of acting suspicious. The footage showed no yelling, no profanity, no attempt to flee. Only Aisha's measured responses as Hargrove grew more agitated, eventually handcuffing her with unnecessary force. Reed introduced the dashcam footage as evidence, and the courtroom's atmosphere shifted. The prosecutor objected, arguing that the footage hadn't been properly authenticated, but the judge overruled, allowing it to be played. As the video rolled, the jury watched in stunned silence. Aisha's calm professionalism stood in stark contrast to Hargrove's aggressive posturing. The moment when he claimed she reached for something in her vehicle, the footage showed her hands firmly on the steering wheel. His claim of profanity and yelling? The audio revealed only Aisha's steady voice, asking for clarification on the reason for her detention. Hargrove's face reddened as the video played. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his earlier confidence replaced by a growing unease. The jury's eyes darted between him and the screen, their expressions hardening. Reed seized the moment, his questions now pointed. "Officer Hargrove, can you explain why your testimony contradicts the evidence we've just seen?" Hargrove stammered, claiming he might have misremembered some details under the stress of the moment. "It was a high-pressure situation," he said, his voice faltering. "Things can get confused." Reed didn't let up. "High pressure? The footage shows my client complying fully with your instructions. Yet you claimed she was belligerent and a threat. Why would you misrepresent the events so drastically?" Hargrove's responses grew weaker, his excuses unraveling as Reed pressed him on every discrepancy. The jury's murmurs grew louder, their trust in Hargrove's testimony eroding with each passing minute. Then came the turning point. Reed called Aisha to the stand. Until now, she had been a silent figure, her background unknown to the court. Reed began by asking her to state her occupation. Aisha's voice was clear and steady as she responded, "I am a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy, serving as a SEAL team leader." A ripple of surprise ran through the courtroom. The judge raised an eyebrow, the prosecutor froze, and the jury leaned forward, their interest piqued. Aisha explained her role briefly, but with authority. She had served for 15 years, leading high-stakes missions in conflict zones, training alongside some of the most elite soldiers in the world. Her record was impeccable, medals for valor, commendations for leadership, and a reputation for discipline under pressure. She described the night of the traffic stop, confirming the dashcam footage's accuracy. "I followed protocol," she said. "I remained calm, provided my documentation, and complied with all instructions." Officer Hargrove's account of the events is not accurate. The prosecutor, caught off guard, tried to challenge Aisha's credibility, suggesting she might have been agitated or uncooperative due to the stress of her job. Aisha's response was unflinching. "Ma'am, I've led teams under enemy fire. A traffic stop doesn't rattle me." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, some jurors nodding in admiration. Her composure, her credentials, and the undeniable evidence of the dashcam footage were dismantling the prosecution's case. As Aisha stepped down, Reed called a final witness, Captain James Whitaker, Aisha's commanding officer. Whitaker, a grizzled veteran with decades of service, testified to Aisha's character and professionalism. "Lieutenant Commander Brooks is one of the finest officers I've ever served with," he said. "She's disciplined, level-headed, and has a reputation for handling high-pressure situations with grace. The idea that she would act recklessly during a routine traffic stop is absurd." He also confirmed that Aisha had been on leave, visiting a friend in the area, and had no reason to be speeding or acting suspiciously. The prosecution's case crumbled. Ellison, realizing the tide had turned, scrambled to salvage her argument, but the jury's expressions told the story. They had seen the footage, heard Aisha's testimony, and listened to Whitaker's endorsement. Hargrove's lies were exposed, and with them, a deeper issue came to light. His comment about Aisha not belonging in the neighborhood, caught on the dashcam, hinted at a bias that had driven his actions. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning a not guilty verdict. But the story didn't end there. What he didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that Aisha Brooks was no ordinary civilian. She was a decorated Navy SEAL, a high-ranking officer who had faced combat zones and covert missions with nerves of steel. As Hargrove's lies unraveled, the truth would not only expose his deception but shake the very foundation of the case, revealing a story of prejudice, power, and redemption. Aisha's case drew attention from local media, and soon, the story of a decorated Black female Navy SEAL being wrongfully targeted spread. Community leaders demanded an investigation into Hargrove's conduct, and the police department launched an internal review. Hargrove was placed on administrative leave, his career in jeopardy as more questions arose about his history of arrests in the community. Aisha, meanwhile, returned to her duties, her focus unshaken. She didn't seek the spotlight, but her story inspired others. Young women, particularly women of color, reached out to her, asking about her journey to becoming a SEAL. She responded to each one, encouraging them to pursue their goals with resilience. Challenges come in many forms, she told one group during a community event. Whether it's a combat zone or a courtroom, you stay calm, you stay focused, and you let the truth do the talking. The ripple effects of the trial lingered. The police department implemented new training on bias and de-escalation, prompted by the public outcry over Aisha's case. Hargrove faced disciplinary action, and while he maintained his version of events, the evidence was undeniable. The dashcam footage became a teaching tool, shown in academies to highlight the consequences of false reporting. Aisha's name became synonymous with strength and integrity, a reminder that even in the face of injustice, truth and resilience could prevail. For Aisha, the trial was a blip in a career defined by service. She continued to lead her team, training for the next mission, her discipline unwavering. The courtroom had been a battlefield of a different kind, but she had faced it with the same courage that had carried her through war zones. Her story wasn't just about one traffic stop or one trial. It was about the power of standing tall, even when the odds seemed stacked against you. And in that small courtroom, on that unassuming day, Aisha Brooks had proven that no lie could outshine the truth.